Our neighbours India and Sri Lanka are looking forward to advancing their ties further with the first overseas visit of the island nation's recently elected President Anura Kumara Dissanayake to New Delhi for 3 days. The Lankan is set to meet his Indian counterpart and Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday. Here's more.
A warm welcome to the recently elected Anura Kumara Dissanayake in New Delhi by India's Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, L. Murugan. The Sri Lankan president on Sunday began his maiden 3-day state visit to India after assuming office. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, called on the Lankan leader within hours of his landing in New Delhi. Prior to his arrival, while announcing Disanayake's visit, India's Ministry of External Affairs had said President Dissanayake is set to meet his Indian counterpart. He'll hold discussions with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders will take up bilateral issues of mutual interest. He will also participate in a business event in Delhi. The event is to promote investment and commercial linkages between India and Sri Lanka. The Lankan president will also visit Bodh Gaya during his India visit. The Foreign Ministry further said that Sri Lanka is India's closest maritime neighbor. Sri Lanka also holds a central place in PM's vision of Sagar and India's neighborhood first policy. Sagar stands for security and growth for all in the region. Sri Lankan leader's visit to India assumed significance after his party's victory with a 2/3 majority in the recent parliamentary election and amid his government's efforts to rebuild the country's crisis-hit economy. The invitation for the visit was extended by India's External Affairs Minister, who travelled to Colombo shortly after Disanayake's electoral victory. Dr. Jaishankar was the first foreign dignitary to visit Sri Lanka following the National People's Power or the NPP alliance's government's rise to power. India remains among Sri Lanka's largest trading and investment partners. It provided a multifaceted assistance to the island nation of over $4 billion during its 2022 economic crisis. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, let's go across to DD India's Jessica Taneja. She has more information on this. She's joining us live from the newsroom. Jessica, good morning. This is President Disanayake's first bilateral visit to India since he assumed presidency. What do we expect when he meets PM Modi for the bilateral talks?
Well, certainly we're looking at energy sector cooperation as well as looking at more projects that could link India and Sri Lanka. And with now, the Sri Lankan president Anura Dissanayake at the helm of affairs, there's a packed schedule for him. As the report also pointed out, he'll be going to Bodh Gaya, a place of huge significance to not just Sri Lankans but also Indians and Buddhists across the world. So of course that gains momentum with the relationship that India has had with Sri Lanka for many years now. As you recall, many discussions likely would take place, especially also talking about the debt linkages and the debt restructuring. Now, if you recall, just 2 months ago, India had extended Sri Lanka's debt repayments to the tune of around $1.75 billion. And that was before Sri Lanka could default on its debt, external debt. So a lot of pressure on the Sri Lankan government. And this is Sri Lankan President Anura Disanayake's first official visit. Of course, there will be many followed to China as well. But India being the first, of course, is a highlight to the effect that India is an important partner, not just about economic integration or how India has come to help Sri Lanka time and time again when it has faced economic crisis or turbulence, so to say. And India has been one of the first responders, as you'd recall.
Right.
$4 billion were given initially in 2022. And then, of course, the IMF bailout, where India, along with France, had made great efforts to keep Sri Lanka on a certain economic stability.
Jessica, also, after he landed yesterday, Sri Lanka President met India's Finance Minister, External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, and also NSA Ajit Doval. Briefly tell us the takeaways and highlights of his meetings?
Well, earlier this year in February, you'd recall, Anura Dissanayake was also here in India for a brief visit. He wasn't elected as the president back then yet, but he has been familiar with the Indian polity, and there have been various interactions in the past as well. So this perhaps, of course, after assuming charge as the president of the country, he has lots on the agenda, as I pointed out, especially when it comes to Sri Lanka's external debt. Now, if you look at where it stands right now, its debt is over 100% of its GDP. That also includes half of its foreign reserves. So quite a troublesome moment for Sri Lanka. It's not out of the woods yet, though it's looking like it will become stable, and the kind of policies that were previously in place, put in place by the leaders like Ranil Wickremesinghe, as you'd recall, when the Rajapaksas had fled in 2022, leaving Sri Lanka in an absolute economic downturn. Those policies have largely continued. So allowing that space to sort of see how both the countries will continue to work on those policies to make sure that Sri Lanka is on the right path, especially when it comes to not defaulting on its external debt and not falling into the trap of, debt repayment, especially when it comes from the side of China, which continues to remain one of its biggest lenders. So important point for India here is to keep Sri Lankans engaged, which India has. Keep providing it the kind of assistance it has required time and time again without having unnecessary conditions attached to it. And of course, a lot of leniency shown, especially when it comes to the crisis Sri Lanka has been put in for the longest time. Now, the task ahead for the new president who's here in India would be to negotiate some tough deals, especially in the energy sector and the connectivity sector. So once those outcomes are known later in the day, when the two leaders have met and held those bilateral talks, and those outcomes are known to us as to what exactly have the two sides agreed on, though we do have a rough idea about how this could go, but we'll still wait for the official confirmation as to what was then finally decided before there's a meeting, of course, also lined up with the business community here in India to see how both the countries can look forward to more economic integration and somehow help sustain Sri Lanka's economy, be it through travel, because that is tourism is one of the strongest sectors right now for Sri Lanka, and improving that would certainly go a long way, but that is just one aspect of it. The energy sector is also something that demands immediate attention, so one will have to wait and see on how all of this pans out, Abhishek.
All right, Jessica, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your inputs. Jessica Taneja reporting from New Delhi.